Hay. Times 4 all good men to come to aid help aid of their code.
Very good. Did you use any of the Phillips Code abbreviations?
No, I didn't. I know I haven't, no. I know some of it, though.
That's what, so that you spelled out each individual word.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm going to focus on your hand for a second. I want to just do a couple, just the regular letters, as soon as I focus down here. And just do the, like a little bit A, B, C. Just call it out A and then the letter.
Period. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Very nice.
Any more?
How about, can you do the numbers perhaps, maybe?
The what?
Number.
The numbers. 1,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Come here, Jim. I ought to practice a little bit. I never do. I haven't. Never have. These are dashes. This is a figure 5. 3 dashes. See? This is the letter P. 5 dots. And this is the letter O. A dot, space, dot, space, dot. You want that something like that?
okay, hold it. Jim, show us the letters, how they're formed by you moving your fingers on the bug.
Just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Now.
A, B, C, that's 2 dots, space and a dot. D is a dash and 2 dots. E is a dot. F a dot, dash, dot. G is 2 dashes and a dot. H is 4 dots. I is 2 dots. J is a dash, a dot, a dash and a dot. K, a dash and a dot and a dash. K. L is a dash. M is 2 dashes. N is a dash and a dot. O is a dot, space and a dot. P is 5 dots. Q is 2 dots, a dash and a dot. R is a dot, a space, 2 dots. S is 3 dots. T is a dash, U is 2 dots and a dash. W is a dash and 2 as a dot, 2 dashes. X is a dot, a dash and 2 dots. I got an F in there. X, Y is 2 dots, a space and a 2 dots. Z is 3 dots, a space and a dot. I guess that's all.
Let's take a look at the numbers, and what I focused on is the sounder itself.
Just 1 to 10?
Yeah, or 1 to 0 through 9 would be fine. It's something like that. That was 2?
That's 1. Oh, all right. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's lousy. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Guess that's a dash and 4 dots. Is that 3 dots or 4? I think 10. 8, 9. Wait, that's this would be better. 9, 10, 11, 12. What's the matter? 12. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Want any more?
No, it's fine. Excellent.
I'll
Very
have
nice.
to practice more. The only time I practice is when we have a meeting. I never.
That's all right. How about you just send a message but not say what it is? Send anything you want.
Okay, how long?
20, 30 seconds.
Okay.
I'll time it.
Now is a good time to come to the age of your party.
Here you go. Right. That's fine. Just send that.
Now's the time to come to the end of your party.
Very good. Okay, how about just for a couple minutes, tell us about your work with the railroad. Did you work with the railroad?
Oh,
or
yes.
with Western Union?
Uh-huh.
Anna worked with Western Union.
I worked with the AT&T more than Western Union.
Okay, so you didn't work for a railroad?
Oh, yes.
Ah.
Oh, yes, I went to work for the railroad when I was 16 years old on the BR&P. Then I was on there a year and a half. Then I went with the Pennsylvania Railroad and was with them 2 years. Then I went with the AT&T as an operator and wire chief. I was with them about 10 years. And I did some extra work with the AT&T. In other words, we called it scooping. In other words, and also with the postal. I worked with both companies, just see how their work was. And with the Western Union, well, a lot of the messages were sent the telegrams were sent, it was contract. In other words, if you were copying and the operator was sending messages to you, and you would break and couldn't keep up with him, well, he would call your manager and he'd say, well, lift him. So then you'd have to get up and give it to some other operator that could copy it down faster than you could. Something like that. Of course, with the AT&T, our job was mostly test the circuits out that went bad, locate them with the Wheatstone Bridge, locate the trouble with the Wheatstone Bridge, get the order the lineman out, and he would go to a certain pole. All telephone poles were numbered. He would go to a certain pole, and you would make a test to him. If it would be a ground, why he could open the wire and you could tell whether he was the ground, the treble was east or west of him. And if it was a short, of course, you would take a loop and varley. And that way, you could get an idea right where the trouble was. And of course, we also tested the equipment out. A telephone operator would call up and say that a certain circuit wasn't working properly. The voice wasn't coming in plain. Well, we'd make a test on the office equipment, and if we locate the trouble, if it would be in the phantom coil or the duplex coil, well, we'd notify the equipment man and he would replace it. And what else do you want?
With the railroad, and you worked with the railroad directly?
Yeah,
was that in like a train station?
Oh, I worked there. I worked on the railroad at the for the Pennsylvania on the BRP, at the block stations. And as trains would go by, you would record the name and the number and the time the train went by. You would give that to the dispatcher, and he kept a record of it in the office. And of course, on the Pennsylvania, we had interlocking plants to operate. In other words, if a train was coming, going south, say from McCain, well, that was between Kane and Wilcox, was a double track. Between Wilcox and Johnsonburg, it was single track. Well, you had to throw the switches and give the throw the switches and lock them with the what do I want to say?
The big switch lever? I mean, the big
yeah, that's
switch
right,
lever.
with the lever, yeah, you lock them. And of course, large places, like where there's a yard, like at the Emporium Junction, we had at least 44 levers in that interlocking plant in Emporium. You had 2 yards to contend with. And you had the Buffalo Division and our Nova Division came together at Emporium Junction. And of course, if the train was coming off the Buffalo Division, you would set the switches up to go from the Buffalo Division over to the Renoa Division. The same way if the trains were coming the opposite direction. So, in Driftwood, they had the interlocking plants were electrically operated. In other words, you just would use a small lever to determine the direction the train was going, and then of course you would lock the switches. And you want to hear anything is trouble we've had?
Yeah, please.
I almost caused a wreck one time. I remember one time I was working driftwood, and there was a fellow working at Huntley, the next station to me, and he didn't have much experience in railroading. And there was a train coming south, and they were going to reverse the freight train in order to leave 580, that's the Philadelphia Erie fast train, get around the freight train. Well, the operator at HY put the signal out. In other words, if you had an order for a train, you put the red light out on a...
The block signal.
What's that?
The block signal?
Yes, put that out and keep the block signal red until the engineer acknowledged your order signal. But then when he did that, then you turn the block green, and that would be the
How would the engineer acknowledge the order signal?
Yeah, that's right. He'd have...
How would they do that?
Oh, well, they'd acknowledge it by 2 blasts of their whistle.
Okay.
2 blasts of the whistle. And then, of course, this one occasion, the engineer didn't answer the order signal, and the operator called me and he said, "What will I do?" I said, "Leave it red. Don't take that lantern out there." And whenever the conductor saw the red lantern order signal, he put the air brakes on, and it broke the train in 2 right at the switch. And the engineer called up at the telephone to Easton of the siding, and he said, "What's the matter? What do you got for me?" And I called him by name. I said, first I asked him who it was, and he told me. Well, I said, "Butler, you know, you run back and buy an order signal." "Oh, did I?" says, "Yes." "Oh, I don't report it, don't report it." Well, I says, "I'm going to tell you something. You've been awfully mean to the operators. I work extra, I'm an emergency man. They call me maybe 2 o'clock in the morning to go to a tower to relieve the man. Connie was ill, sick. And if I'd have to go and ride on an engine with you, and to go or come to the job, and you would start to curse and give me the dickens. So I says, "You know, I think we better report this." "Oh," he says, "don't do it, don't do it." I says, "Well, if you'll change your mind," I says, "we won't report it, we'll cover it up for you." So, which we did, and he was different from then on. Then I remember one other time, I was working at HY, and of course I got up at 2 o'clock to be to work at 7. I was sitting at the desk, and the operator Keating asked me for the block for 577. I gave him the block, and I fell asleep. And I heard someone walk, and I looked around, and there was a conductor walking. See, when I would fall asleep or something would happen, I never turned my block signals green, kept them red. And of course Mercer knew me, and he said, "Oh, Jim, what do you got for us?" I says, "Nothing." I says, "I just fell asleep." So he says, "I can't cover this up. We were delayed at CT, kind of a frozen block." And I said, "Well, report it." I said, "I don't care." So after he gave the report to the operator in Erie, he sent it over the wire. I heard it going. In about 5 minutes, dispatcher called me, and he said, "Jim, 577 turns a delay in 3 minutes for the block." He said, "What was wrong?" I says, nothing, Al, only I was asleep. He says, okay. I never heard a word from it. And then he said this. Oh no, that's just another occasion. But I said, I was asleep. And, well, that's all there was to that one. Oh, I had many occasions. Different things happened. But one time I almost caused a wreck. What happened, I qualified in this driftwood interlocking plant probably 4 or 5 months before I worked. See, they would send you in to make tests and study the plant. And then after you would think you had it, well, they'd send somebody out and test you on it. Well, you not pass the test. But driftwood had what they call a turn train. In other words, the freight that came to driftwood on the Pittsburgh division, why they make up the train at the Emporium, but they take this all of the cars to Emporium that they had to change, and they call it driftwood turn. And this engine caboose was ahead of 580, passenger train. And he went down the main track, and I didn't know he wanted to go in the driftwood yard. I figured he went down there, and he stopped, and he wants me to put him down the siding. I set the switch to the siding, and set the signal for him to reverse, thinking he was going into siding. But that signal controlled the movements up the main track and the siding. And 580 was right up the station coming, and this engine and caboose had started up right in the face of them, and they stopped, and the conductor came up and he says, "You want to kill everybody on there?" I said, "Kill us?" I says, "No." I says, "Well, I didn't give you a signal to go up the main track." Well, I forgot about the dwarf signal took care of the movements both places. So I told the dispatcher. He said, write it up and put it on 79. We'll have it in the morning. If it's reported, we'll know just what to do. Well, I did that. And so the next couple of days, one of the assistant superintendents came down to Driftwood. I was working there for a week. And he started questioning me about it. "Didn't you do this? Didn't you do that?" I said, "No." Well, he said, finally he questioned me, you know. He says, "Okay, forget about it then. I just wanted to see if you're going to try to lie out of it." I said, "No, I don't have to lie out of it." I said, "I told you what happened," and I said, "That's what it was." He says, "Well, we knew it. We knew it the morning we looked at your letter. The electricians looked at the currents to the different switches, and they knew what happened, but we just wanted to know if you were going to try to lie out of it." I said, "I don't have to do that." So, that's about a dozen things happen.
So you were also working in the tower.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Whereas, did you ever work where you'd be sending messages, for people like?
Oh yeah. Oh, in all of those towers, the Western Union had a wire in the office. Take a little town like Driftwood or different places. Well, the Western Union had a wire, and if they wanted to send a telegram, they could do that. Now, I worked at Driftwood, but let's see, what was the name of the company? It was owned by DuPont. They had a factory in Cinnamahoney, just a few hundred people, but they did a lot of their testing up in the mountains. They could use, dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it was DuPont. they'd test the powder down about up in the mountains. And of course, all of the messages the office would send for the men up at Cinnamon would be, the messages would be, I can't think right now. In other words, so nobody could understand them. What would you call that?
They were encoded.
Yeah, they'd be coded.
Yeah, they'd be coded.
Couldn't think of. Yeah, the message would be coded, so nobody knew what they were doing. And up in Warren and up in that area, why some of the that was quite an oil producing section. Crude oil was discovered up there in Oil City. And of course, a lot of the oil companies down in the south had interest in the companies up there. And we had the Western Union wire. If anything happened, why this and everything sometimes be coded too. Send it on wire, we'd copy the message and call them up and make them down, pick it up. Yes, every office had a Western Union wire. And what else happened?
You were at, you would send just plain messages. In other words, you'd work in an office that just sent messages?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we send them. Oh yeah, send them. During the flu epidemic, during the First World War, see, there were so many servicemen got the flu. And it was sad then. Well, I was working at St. Mary's, and there was a man, he was in the service, and I think had about, 6 or 8 children. And I received a message that he had died from the flu. Well, of course, he lived close to the office, and a message like that, I would get it over to him right away. And I got out of his office. The assistant took over, and I went over and delivered the message to him. But something like that was very sad. And during the war, the flu epidemic, I was stood on continuous duty, you might say. In other words, an emergency work. If an operator got sick, regardless of what it was, they'd put me on a train or somebody to get me out there, milk train or anything to get me out there. And I know in St. Mary's, trains didn't stop at the station. The epidemic was so bad. All the stores were closed except drugstores. The drugstores had all flu medication facts and stored on the counter. All you had to do was go in and pick it up. I guess the government must have paid for it. I don't know who paid for it. And all the halls in St. Mary's were turned over for emergency use, because when they had this flu, they'd put them in these like a fire hall or different halls. And as I said, the trains didn't stop there. That's frightening, dude. In other words, the town was quarantined. A lot of people never knew that. But I went there, but the operator got sick, the interlocking plant man, and they called and got a hold of me. I went up, and I went up on an engine. They slowed the engine down there at the station. I hopped off the engine while it was moving. They didn't dare stop. What else was there? Oh, so many things happened.
Jim, when did you get interested in being working telegraph? Yeah.
Well, that happened, I'd say, back in 1904 15. I had an uncle who was a telegraph operator on the railroad. I guess it was through him. I was interested in railroad work anyway. And there was a tower right below where we lived. You cross a couple of fields and there was a telegraph office. I'd get on there and loaf with the operator and listen on the dispatcher's phone with the work reporting trains and all. And I'd practice Morse. Well, then I got a set of my own, and I practiced. Well, then I could send, but I mean I couldn't receive much. So I spent a couple of months with my uncle in Kent, Indiana County. He was an operator. He was at Jam Junction, and I would go out there and listen, and I got experience there. I was only 16 years old, so I went to work with the BRP then. I mean, he thought I was ready to get a job, so I went to Du Bois, and they tested me on the rules and everything, and they hired me. Let's say I was 16 years old. But that didn't last long. I was handing orders on a train one morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, freight train going south. And of course the engineer took the order off of the hoop and threw the hoop over the side. This is something. And I come in the office, phone was ringing. Someone on the phone on the line says, "Home, get awake up there." Well, I says, I'm not asleep. I says, I just handed orders on the train. No, you didn't. You've been asleep. So I says, no, I wasn't. So in about a week or two, I got a message from the superintendent, general manager's office to report in for a hearing. So this assistant superintendent was out spotting around to get people where, could be a train would stop. He'd look and see if the flagman got off right away and all that stuff, and trying to find operators asleep. So they had this hearing, and the assistant superintendent turned his back to us. I looked out looking out the window, and telling him, saying I slept and all this and that, which wasn't true. And the general manager says, "Young fellow, what do you have to say for yourself?" Well, I says, "He's a liar." Right away, where do you want your check sent? I said, "Where I always got it." So, of course, naturally, I was out of a job. I could telegraph. So I went above Williamsport to Elmira, New York, to get a job on the Pensy up there. I wouldn't tell them where I'd work for BRP, see, because they'd contact them, they'd say that they fired me because I was sleeping on duty. So I went to Elmira, New York, and they tested me on the rules and the telegraph. They says, "You're passed real good. But," he says, "you're such a small little boy, you'd have to work in the towers down in the mountains that's between Williamsport and Elmira, New York. And they're mostly foreigners. You'd have to board at a foreigner's office, home rather. And he says, "We don't want to send you down there." So he says, "In a couple of years, come back and we'll hire you." So I didn't really make out there. So I thought, well, here's a PSNN, that's Du Bois. That's only about 12 miles from where I was raised. So I thought, well, I'll go over to the PSNN, see what they have to say. So I went in and asked them if they needed any operators. This is during World War I. And he said, "No, we don't need any." So, but wait a minute. So he went on the telephone and he called up somebody, and I heard him say, "Mac, do you need any telegraph operators?" Well, I knew it was McCarthy, the fellow that caused me to get fired, I was talking to. Well, I didn't dare him tell him my name was Caldwell. He said, yeah, they need some operators at the BRMP, and what's your name? I didn't dare say that. I said, Curry, John Curry. See, I wasn't an A1 operator, see, but I had to get a job, learn to be an A1 man. So I worked in the job. They had the meanest, roughest jobs. So I could telegraph, I could copy forms, I could do anything then. And I sent my reports in. I was working Clarion Junction, AJ and Johnsonburg. And at the end of the reports, I said, please accept this as my resignation and take effect immediately. See, I wanted to quit and go and get my right name, because I could do the job. And Patty Swift was the dispatcher, and he always called me Curry Boy. So the minute they got that message in the office, Patty says, Curry Boy, let me destroy that message. I need you there. I says, no, I'll leave it go through, Patty. So they called him McCarthy, the fellow caused me to get fired. He came down and he talked with me. And he says, come in the morning. So I went in the morning, met him to train. He came up and put his arm around me. And he said, oh, you just got mad about something. He says, forget about it. I need you bad up there. And he kept arguing and arguing. So finally I said, Mr. McCarthy, do you remember the fellow that used to sleep up at home? That was a year more later. He says, yes, you mean Caldwell? I said, that's me. I said, that's why I'm quitting. I got to get my correct name. I can telegraph any place now. So he said, oh, I need you bad. Go up there and go to work. Keep your job. We'll give you your seniority, change your name back, anything you want. And I said, no, that would be right to the other people. I wouldn't dare do that. So he says, well, wherever you go, I'll give you a good recommendation. So I went to Pennsylvania then, and evidently did. I stayed with them until 1920. And so that was quite an experience. I was determined to learn, but I knew I could work on the BRP, and because I had experience there, see.
How were you taught? How do they teach people?
Huh?
Do they have like a school? How did you learn?
No, you just listen to it. In other words, you listen to the wire, messages going over the wire. You have maybe two or three wires in your office. One is for different things, and you've got your Western Union wire and all, and one for the dispatchers. So you just listen to them and try to copy. You'd sit there with a pencil and you first start, maybe you get in one of the letters of the alphabet or something. You just have to listen and listen until you get to it. And of course then I went with the BRMP. I worked any job they had. Mr. Sarwine, he must have thought I was good, because he got me. See, back in 1920, the war was over, and the government, during the war, the government took the railroads over in the First World War. They operated them, the government did. But when the war was over, they gave the railroads back to private ownership. Well, I wouldn't bid a regular job in, because I could work any high-priced job they had. See, in other words, a small block office job wouldn't pay near what an interlocking plant job would pay. So I wouldn't, actually I was one of the first to go. I was on the extra list. So Mr. Sarwine was in Kane. He was talking to the supervisor for the AT&T. He said we'd have to lay some operators off. So, he says, if you have any good operators, he says, we can use some AT&T in Pittsburgh. So he gave him my name, and of course I found that out later, see, but I had to have a job, So when I was a kid, about 13 and 14, I worked in a brickyard. And there's a brickyard up in the mountain, so I went down to the junction, get a train to go to Cameron. I was going up in the mountains to this brickyard and get a job. And I was there waiting for the train. The operator, J.N., come out and hollered me to come down to the office. He said, Sarwin wants to talk to you. So I called him in Arrington. And he told me, he said he met so-and-so, the AT&T in Kane. There's the same hotel. And he said that they need some operators at the AT&T. I'll send you a transportation pass to Pittsburgh and return back to Renova if you're not hired. So I went down to Pittsburgh and went out to Brushton, and they interviewed me. And about 10:30 or 11, they called me and said, go ahead. The chief desk board man and a supervisor, they keep interviewing me, see? And then finally they called me and they says, well, have you had your lunch? I says, no, not yet. Go get your lunch and we'll start your pay as of this morning. So that's how I went with the AT&T. Well then, I worked with some operators, and if the AT&T needed any test board men or telegraph operators, they'd come to me. They hired 3 men that I worked with on the railroad. Mercer was one, and McLaughlin was one. He was from Philadelphia. And Moore was another one. They'd asked me if they needed one, so of course I was with them. I tested the first cable between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. Then the first cable between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, 1922. The first cable was put in. See, everything was open wire until then. And see, the AT&T, they had what they call the repeater office. That was downtown. See, everything was on this open wire. In front of our office in Brushton, there was 5 cross arms, 10 wires on each cross arm. That was 50 wires. And then, of course, everything was open wire in those days. See, back in 1920, 20 long there, they didn't have cables. As a matter of fact, they didn't have a cable any place except maybe some of the. In other words, back in 1922, if a party in Philadelphia wanted to talk to a party in Pittsburgh, they would ring what they call the RX office. That's out in Brushton. Everything came into Brushton. Then if it would be a telephone call in Pittsburgh, they had a circuit from our office down to the Bell telephone in Pittsburgh. That's how they got through. And of course, later on, I tested the cables out to run all the way through. But quite an experience. I know I had hope and wire. I have a snowstorm, winter, the lines would go down, we'd have men crowding every place. I remember one time, there wasn't a telephone circuit out of Pittsburgh. Couldn't go anyplace. So I had worked with the railroad, see, and I tested all of the circuits. In other words, we just took a shot. We'd take a loop, see. We could tell, how many ohms, it was in, and then divide it. It was 12 gauge, divided by 10, so many miles. Well, I would call the railroad operator and ask him to call so-and-so in that town and tell him to go to the telephone line and pull so-and-so and start to go east. And then another one, I'd say, and come the same place and start to go west. That's the way we had to do it back in those days. But, I've had quite an experience.
Did you always work in the telegraphy? Did you Always, I mean, till you retired?
Oh, well, I quit telegraphing, let's see, back in '29. I went in business. I quit the AT&T. I was with the AT&T at Bedford. And my wife was from there, and she didn't want to leave. They were transferring men from the office there to different places. And she didn't want to leave. It was a business for sale, and I bought it. That was in '29. Well, we had a depression of trade. See, Bedford is a farmer's town. Well, the farmers had enough food. They didn't buy much. So I went bankrupt. So, anyway, I worked for the pipeline. I walked pipeline for about a year. In other words, you carried a telegraph switch with you and a pair of climbers. If you found trouble, you climbed the pole. They had all oil companies had a single line following the pipeline. If there was trouble, you would climb the pole and call the office and work. We had one of our fellows worked for pipeline too. I forget what his name is. His father did too. But I worked for them. And I worked in the office they had. Everything was telegraphed. Everything those days was telegraphed. Oh well.
Very interesting. Do you, when you worked in offices like AT&T and you'd copy, did you ever copy telegrams, is what I'm saying, the regular, you've copied telegrams, the regular kind?
Oh, like the Western Union on forms like they had? No, we didn't. Oh, no. No. As far as with the AT&T, now there was the repeater office. That was downtown. Well, all of the circuits came into Brushton, and each circuit had what the hell? Christ, I can't think right. It had
A relay?
No. You take a branch off. In other words, there would be a pair of wires.
Trunk line.
Power would come in. First was the equipment put on there to take a telegraph wire off of that pair of wires. See, that'll come to me. This composite set, and of course you'd take 4 wires. Why put a phantom coil on there? You could take an extra telephone circuit off there. But it was a complex. The set, yeah. Well, then that wire, telegraph wire, was on a leg that went down to the city. And that was different, curve mark, but it was all repeaters. In other words, newspaper wires. Well, let's say from New York wire would come there, come out to Brushton, and then we would take a leg off, send it downtown, and at these repeater tanks, they'd take legs off of that. In other words, you had composite sets on the different lines, different offs. In other words, whenever they take the leg off, as I call it, it's a branch, why the circuit be weak. Maybe it would be a circuit goes to Chicago, but it'd be weak. So they go through the repeaters in order to make it stronger, make the circuit stronger. So that was, maybe it'd be, take the newspaper wire, come down there, one went to Morgantown, some of them in Morgantown, West Virginia, different places, maybe Charleston, West Virginia. There'd be legs go to those places, or maybe up to Kane, different place in Pittsburgh. But that's what they did down at the repeater room.
So a message coming, say, from New York to Pittsburgh, if it was going to go to Chicago, it would not go directly to Chicago,
No,
but it would be
that's right.
repeated. And how did they repeat them? Did they actually wrote it down and resend it?
No, it goes through the instruments.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes through the repeaters, they call it. It would be weak going in here, then of course the electric all steps it up and it comes out as strong. Well, that's all it is, just
Although the telegraph lines usually ran along railroads.
well, that was the railroad's line. See, the railroad had to have the telephone and the telegraph line. Oh yeah, that was railroad lines.
I just was wondering, do they ever run through like city streets and other areas?
What's
The actual telegraph lines, if they run through, they didn't have to run along railroad tracks all the time. They could run pretty well anywhere.
They were, to be truthful, the telegraph lines were taken off of the telephone lines. There's a composite set put on there, see? In other words, you had well, maybe if you're saying to Pittsburgh, maybe a United Press telegraph company or newspaper would have a line from the Pittsburgh. Why then there'd be a trunk taken off of that to go someplace else. That was done down to the city. But in other words, well, most of the larger towns didn't have to be in the city. They had a test board, a wire chief there to make those changes on the board. But well, it was quite a thing in its day. Other brokers, you know. See, we had all the brokers' wires came over the AT&T. The brokers, in fact, everything did. We sit there and listen to the ball games. See? And you see, who was it? Lindbergh? I remember the time he went across. You had to go by everything. Most of it was telegraph. I was in Bedford then. I don't know how many people called up and wanted to know where it was. See, I could listen to the wire and tell what it was what. Yeah.
Any other major news? Did you handle other major news?
What's that?
Other big news for big events.
Yeah.
Any famous things, messages you handled?
We didn't handle a message. They just the line just went through. They had their own operators. See, in other words, these newspaper companies, they had their own telegraph operators in their office. See, all we did was just set up a circuit to them. And what else is there? No, I tested the first lines, cables, and the cable between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. That was the first cable.
How did the duplex work? Duplex. Is it a duplex system?
Yeah.
How did that work?
Well, the duplex is, how did well, they just hooked the wires up together, in other words. In other words, we'll say everything comes in on this set here. Before it gets to the set, they take legs off the wire over to some other instruments, see? I remember the first duplex I worked at. I was, this is back in, I guess, 1918. I was working at Keating, that's in above Renoa. And I went to work this Sunday afternoon. There was a telegram there. Report to the manager, 10th floor Union Station, Pittsburgh, at midnight Sunday night. But what happened? see, in those days, the railroads, they took bids on different jobs. I just forgot what I sent my bid on. See, I don't know why. But anyway, they selected me. I was only about 18 years old. So I went down to Pittsburgh, and I went up and must have been about 30 operators in that office. And I was there, I don't know how many, maybe a year or more. And see, all they did, what they did there was the general manager's office. All of the other offices in the Pittsburgh division, or the Eastern Division, send reports of the car. All reports went to them, and we copied them. And I sat down, and the manager says, "Hey, go on, sit down here and take this wire." So I answered the call. What was it? Oh, Jay. And I answered it. He sent me, started to send a message. Here was my instrument, and here was a duplex instrument over here. I opened up, and what the hell goes here? I never knew of a duplex before. No, heck. I was only there about a year, maybe a year. I didn't like Pittsburgh. I liked hunting and getting out in the woods too much. But I finally landed back there with the AT&T. I was in Pittsburgh about, 5 years with the AT&T.
Very nice. Did you, on a duplex line, how many sets could you run?
Oh, I don't remember. Oh, a lot of them.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I don't remember. I didn't do too much of that. They did that at the repeater room, see. All we did was see that everything was in shape. In other words, the telephone circuit went bad. We had to locate the trouble, find out what it was, get someone in on it. Oh no, we took care of the telegraph. In other words, if a telegraph wire went bad, the repeater station downtown, in other words, a big newspaper wire, maybe the leg going to Buffalo, we'll say, or Charleston, West Virginia. Maybe that would go bad. Well, the operator in Charleston push a button, and it would notify the telephone company, and he would call Pittsburgh and tell the operator, the wire chief, and he'd get in touch with our office. When he took some minutes and everything was telegraphed, and they'd tell him that they lost a line. And it was up to us to find out what it was and where it was. In other words, we'd use a Wheatstone bridge to locate it. But, I've had a whole lot of experience.
Very good. Okay, Jim, I wanted to get a couple close-ups, and then I'll pack up, if I may.
My memory's not like it used to be, so I can't remember
That's all right.
things like it used to be.
No, it did very well. Okay, Jim, go ahead. You tell me the story.
That bug, I bought it in Pittsburgh from the operator up in GO office in 1918. I give him $15 for it. You know how old that is.
Very nice. Can you just send a little bit with it with your hand, just. show us the, excuse me, straight key for a second.
Do.
Let me just focus on it, you know. There you go. Show me the straight key.
Do what?
The straight key. Just a teeny bit with that.
Oh, you may handle it?
Mm-hmm. Just quickly the bug again.
Bug? Let's see.